Hello, I'm Alex Burton, and this is the Business File. I want you to watch something with me, some scenes from everyday life that have more than everyday significance. Bear them in mind, as we'll talk more about them later. Well, what did you see? Someone drawing a picture, someone buying a car, paying for goods, making a sales call, having a traffic accident. Everyday scenes, right? Nothing more? Well, that's all I saw, too, until I began researching this program, but there is more, much more. All of these events represent the range of activities that fall under the domain of business law. They show the impact that law has on the most ordinary business transactions, and a little later we'll show you exactly how. Our program today is about business and the law. The law is more than just an element that affects business operations. It's an environment that surrounds business, one of the contexts in which business has to operate, like other business environments such as the economy or labor or society. It is a factor that everyone who runs a business has to take into account. Because regardless of how well that manager is taking care of the basic functions of the business, the legal environment affects the firm's survival. Now, here to give us more background for understanding the scenes we have just seen is attorney Scott Bradley, who is waiting for us in his offices in downtown Dallas. Mr. Bradley has been practicing law for a number of years with the firm of Jenkins and Gilchrist, where he advises clients on various aspects of business law, including his own field, mergers and acquisitions. Mr. Bradley, thank you for letting us visit with you today.
Well, it's good to have you here, Alex, and I hope that I'll be able to at least answer part of your questions.
Or even all of them. My first question, Mr. Bradley, is what areas of the law does someone in business need to be aware of, and why?
Well, in conducting your business, you're going to need to know something about the law of contracts because you're going to be making agreements with other parties. If you're selling goods, you're going to need to know something about the law of sales. You may not always get paid in cash. You may get paid with a check or some other instrument that's called a negotiable instrument, so you should know something about that law. You're conducting business every day on property. You're dealing with property, so you should know something about the law of property. You can't do all of your business by yourself. You sometimes have to get help from others. These are called agents, so you should know something about the law of agency. You may not always do what's right. In that event, you may commit a tort, so you should know something about your liability for those. In addition, if your business is not successful, God forbid, you may need to know something about bankruptcy.
Let's go into the specifics of some of these laws. Tell me what you mean by the law of property, or for that matter, tell me what you mean by property.
Well, Alex, property is something that the individual has a right to possess. Property may be one of several kinds. It may be real property. The land and the building where your business is located would be real property. Personal property may be something like the chairs and the desks that you use in your business, or the automobiles or trucks that deliver your goods. There are also intangible properties, for example, intellectual property, processes that you use in your business that are unique to your business and give it value because no one else has that. The law will recognize your right to be protected in your property rights. Property rights are something that may be sold and passed on to other people.
All right, but what's the importance of this law? As a businessman, why do I need to know about it?
You need to know something about property so that you can conduct yourself properly. For example, if you're dealing with real property, you should know that you've got to get your agreements in writing. Certain other types of agreements may not be enforceable unless they're in writing. Property, you should know real property can be divided into more than one estate. It may be owned by more than one person. The level of ownership may vary. You may own the surface of the property and someone else may own the minerals. So if you're conducting a manufacturing business and someone pulls up with a drilling rig in your back door and starts drilling, you need to know whether he has the right to do that.
I guess you would. Well, let's go on to the law of contracts. What is a contract? Who's involved in making a contract?
Well, in its simplest element, a contract is an agreement between two people. It is an undertaking by two people to do something in the future. Generally, it's just exchanging one promise for another. For example, if I have an automobile I want to sell, I may contract to sell that automobile to you. You would promise to pay for it. That would be an agreement between two people that was supported by what we lawyers call consideration. The consideration may be a promise. It could be something else.
What more would I need to know about contracts?
Well, when you deal with other people, you're going to be undertaking certain obligations, and you have a right to expect that when you undertake those obligations, that other people will feel obligated to perform from their side of the equation. So it's important that you know when you have created rights which others can enforce against you. You also have to know what rights you can enforce against others when you undertake your agreements.
Earlier, you mentioned the law of sales. What's the difference between that and the law of contracts?
Sales may or may not involve what we traditionally think of as contracts. The law of sales grew up from the conduct of business itself, the necessities of business, and it goes back into history many, many years. The law of sales has to do with the marketplace. In a normal contract, there will be undertakings on the parts of two parties where those undertakings are expressly undertaken. You talk about them. You agree to them. In the law of sales, the conduct is probably more important than what is said. If I ship you widgets, for example, and I ship them to you on a regular basis, perhaps 100 every month, and we've engaged in a course of conduct where every month you have paid me for those widgets, perhaps on, let's say, a 10-day basis. Unless something intervenes, if I continue shipping you those widgets, even though we never talked about how long I was going to ship them to you, and you continue to accept them, the law will imply a contract of sorts with you whereby you're obliged to pay for those widgets under the terms that we have by our course of conduct established. Let's suppose you've been paying $200 per widget. There would be a continuing obligation on your part to pay for those widgets at that rate.
Somewhere in all this writing of contracts and selling of goods, I hope I am going to make some money. Is there a law that covers money and how we pay?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the money is not always the green piece of paper that you think of it. Money may be actually a negotiable instrument. It may be a piece of paper that doesn't have a picture of a president on it. It may simply be a piece of paper that says, I, Scott Bradley, promise to pay to the order of Alex Burton $100 on May the 30th. That is an instrument which can serve as money because it is an instrument of exchange. I can purchase goods on that type of instrument.
If you would, explain how that law affects someone in business. What do I need to know about negotiable instruments?
You need to know that you can become liable. The negotiable instruments law has grown up again through the conduct of business over a number of centuries. The law merchant established the law of negotiable instruments. It was a way of conveniently conducting business. It may not always be possible to deliver gold or silver to someone who is going to ship you airplane parts from across the ocean. So we have, through all of these years, have grown accustomed to using various instruments. They may be promissory notes, sometimes just called a note. It may be a check. That is an instrument that's drawn on your account at your bank. Could be a bill of exchange where I draw on your bank expecting that your bank will charge your account. It could be, in some instances, a letter of credit where a bank substitutes its credit for yours.
You mentioned something earlier about agency. How does the law of agency work?
The law of agency has to do with conducting affairs of one person through another person. Obviously, in a business, the owner of the business can't do everything himself. He's going to have sales agents. He may hire a lawyer. He may hire a real estate agent to help him acquire property or to help him sell property. Any time that he's doing business through some other person, he's doing it through an agent. An agent may have limited authority or he may have very expansive authority. It really depends on two things. Number one, what authority, let's suppose that I hire you as an agent, what authority did I give you in reality? And secondly, what authority would third parties who deal with you expect you to have? The marketplace or custom may supply a certain amount of that authority.
Boil that down for us. Why does the person in business need to be concerned about the law of agency?
Alex, you need to be concerned about the law of agency because those people who are acting as your agents may make you responsible for their actions.
Earlier, you mentioned that a business person might not do what's right and commit what's called a tort. Would you explain what that is and what are its consequences?
A tort is, you perhaps know, and I think you do, is a French word, tort, which means wrong. And it was derived from the Latin word tortus, which has the meaning twisted. So conduct which is twisted or wrong may be referred to as a tort. The law holds us liable for the torts that we commit. The torts may cut across all of these other areas of law that we've talked about. You can commit a tort with respect to a contract. You can commit a tort with respect to property. You can commit a tort through an agent. You can commit a tort against the person of someone. In all of those instances, the law may hold you liable.
Give us an example of how a tort might take place.
Well, let's just take a very simple case. Let's suppose that you're out making a delivery in your delivery truck, and unfortunately you hit the little old lady in the crosswalk. That clearly is a tort. You had no right to injure her, but you did, whether it was negligently or purposely.
Mr. Bradley, you have cast light on a number of dark corners for us. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Alex.
Now we're going to go back to the scenes we saw at the beginning of the program, only this time we'll be looking at them with a new frame of reference to see the legal ramifications of these actions. This designer is not just putting the finishing touches on a design, he's creating property. This is intellectual property. That drawing is the person's. It can be, when protected by copyright, the same as other forms of property. A building, a car, a computer. This is not just signing a piece of paper. This piece of paper is a binding contract. When the parties sign the contract, it rules their relationships. Both parties' rights and obligations are spelled out. Think about it before you sign. This is not just a check. It is cash. It is accepted as cash because it can be endorsed and re-endorsed and transferred from person to person, but it creates a continuing obligation. This is not just a person making a sales call. This is a company's agent who has been given the authority to make decisions, to negotiate price, terms of delivery, shipping days. The company is responsible for the obligations agreed upon by the salesperson. This is an accident, but it's even more. It has created a case of liability for the company. The responsibility to repair the vehicle, resolve medical claims, and meet any other obligations which can be settled in court or out of court. Now that we've got a better understanding of the law and its impact on business practices, we're going to go a little deeper and look at its impact from the standpoint of a businessman. John Walsh is a partner in the development firm of Trammell Crow Company, a Texas-based operation which has major projects in that state and many others. He was also at one time the founder and owner of the Walsh Electric Company, so he's had ample opportunity to have first-hand experience of the law and its ramifications. Mr. Walsh, thank you for appearing in the Business File. I've been looking forward to this discussion.
Good. Thank you, Alex. I will enjoy being here, I'm sure.
As a businessman, what areas of the law do you deal with regularly?
Alex, I deal with every area of the law, I think, that comes up. Even to some extent, a little bit of criminal law, because occasionally we have a tenant that moves out and, in essence, puts us in a position where we may have to call the district attorney. Don't like those situations, but they do occur. I deal with contract law almost every day of my life. I deal with sales and the laws regarding sales, both from the point of view of my product as well as the point of view of the products of some of my tenants. Being in the real estate business, we deal, of course, with real estate law and tax law, because both of those areas are very important to the success or failure of our business. Many of our entities are structured as partnerships, some as corporations, so we deal with business entities. Of course, we deal with torts, which is the area of personal liability, negligence, trespass, because we, as property owners, have many exposures to those particular areas of the law.
Well, you obviously understand the law, but how much does the ordinary businessman need to comprehend?
It's critical that a businessman understand the different elements of the law, especially from the point of view of knowing that those elements can create problems.
Okay, then, I want to find out specifically what areas of the law you feel are essential to have a grasp of. Earlier in this program, Scott Bradley mentioned the importance of knowing the law of negotiable instruments. Now, do you agree with him? Is that important to you?
An area of the law that I think all businessmen have to understand is how the money system works. Commercial transactions, negotiable instruments, banking laws. Without understanding that, business is based on dollars and cents, and without understanding that, a businessman is going to be in a handicapped position. At some point, he is going to come up with an answer that is wrong, or he's going to come up in a situation that is a problem area.
How about contracts? Could you get by without understanding that area of the law?
I think contracts law is probably a very, very important area for all businessmen, from the point of view that almost everything you do, whether it's a written contract or not, involves an agreement with someone else to perform or to provide. I'm performing a task, you're providing me payment. You're performing a task, I'm providing a service for that task.
Something you said earlier surprised me. You mentioned that from time to time you were involved in criminal law.
Some businessmen need to be very involved in the criminal aspect of law. Some people deal more with the areas where there are situations where you may have a customer or a client who has not treated you fairly, both under the civil laws as well as the criminal laws.
One thing every businessman has to deal with is taxes. Is it important also to know about tax law?
Tax laws, if there's a businessman in this country who can deal in business without dealing with tax laws, I'd like to meet him. To be a legitimate businessman, you have to understand what the ramifications of your tax payments or your tax deferrals are going to be.
I think we've covered everything but the law of gravity. Can you think of any other problems someone in business might come up against?
Understanding insurance language. Texas has simplified its insurance law somewhat so that a layman can understand insurance. And yet, just because you understand the language does not put you in a position where you really understand that you are covered or not covered in any given instance.
Well, let's suppose that after everything you and Scott Bradley have said, I, as a businessman, still choose not to take the time to understand business law. So what? What are the consequences?
Not knowing the law from a business standpoint often puts you in a situation where somebody else is going to teach you the law, and it's going to be an expensive lesson. And in those instances, it's generally in a courtroom where you learn it. When you get to a courtroom, you failed as a businessman. You're no longer in a position where you're in control of your destiny. You put the control of your destiny in somebody else's hands. Often by just understanding the law, not being an expert, not being a lawyer, not even calling a lawyer, but understanding the law and understanding your position within the design of the law, you can prevent yourself from taking that hard road to experience. An example of one of my tenants was a year ago, they received a tax bill that was well beyond what they should have received it for. The appraised value of their equipment for personal property tax reasons was exorbitant. However, they missed the date on which they could file an automatic appeal. By missing that date, they had no course except to go to court and try and prove their case and hope that a judge, they didn't even allow themselves a route of jury trial, but to hope that a judge could make a decision that was in their favor. As it turned out, it was expensive, and they ended up in a settlement that was far beyond what they would have had they only understood the tax laws as simple as understanding when to file, not even understanding how to file.
That's a sad story. Does it have a moral?
No matter how right they were wrong. And in an instance like that, it's sometimes not fair, but a businessman who doesn't understand the law can't cry unfairness.
As someone who deals daily with the legal problems of doing business, is there any one area that gives you consistent difficulty?
Probably the most difficult area is understanding when to bring in the lawyer. If you have a general understanding of your business and you make logical decisions, logical business decisions about what you are going to do or what you are not going to do, to act or not to act, then most times you don't need a lawyer. Probably the biggest problem is understanding when you have a problem before it becomes a lawyer problem so that you can involve yourself in a situation that has answers before you end up in a situation where answers are going to have to be brought in by a third party. I often look at a deal and I say, John, you're in a deal now, you're committed to it, and you wish you weren't. And I say, gee, if I'd just called the lawyer and spent one or 2 minutes on the phone with him, I would have saved myself hours and hours of frustration.
Is there any particular area where that is more likely to happen?
When you have a tax-driven deal, often you look at it and you say, gee, the tax laws are written this way, and they've changed, or they've been interpreted differently. Every single day, laws change. And so I think the most important area to consider when you're looking at your business is to understand that lawyers are responsible to keep up with what's going on, and you're responsible to make good business decisions for you or your partners or your investors.
Well, with so many different things to consider, how do you ensure that you're in compliance with the law?
Alex, that's a hard question. Ensuring is a tough word when you understand law. But we try and comply by understanding our business. None of my employees or my partners try to be lawyers, but we try to understand where we've made mistakes in the past within the law. We try and understand the language of the law and try and pinpoint our attorneys when we do call them in to explain why and to explain how the situation operates, not just what is the right answer. By understanding that, and the next time we go into a situation, we can assimilate past experiences into what hopes to be a good legal position. I don't want to put everybody on notice that you should always be worried in business, but at the same time, it's important to understand it. And to be worried is one situation that I don't want to be in, and I'm mostly worried when I've been in a situation where I didn't understand the law, when I've backtracked and I've been stuck. So I think that it's important for most businessmen to understand it by keeping up with what they're doing, by watching where they're going, and trying to get a little bit more input than just what should I do, how do I do it, is the better question.
Mr. Walsh, thank you very much for spending this time with us. I know that I've learned a good deal from this discussion.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate that.
All actions have results. In business, many actions have legal results, and those results can bind you to situations you never intended. No one can conduct business outside the environment of business law, and as we've seen, no one can conduct business successfully without understanding those laws. Until next time, I'm Alex Burton, and this has been The Business File.
The preceding program is part of a college credit course.